Fellow nominees, you have turned in the most beautiful, profound work.
He walked into the Oscars like a man possessed. Slick black tuxedo, that unmistakable Elvis drawl still hanging on his lips. Cameras loved him, fans screamed for him, and in that moment, it felt like Hollywood had found its next golden boy. But while the world watched Austin Butler rise graceful, magnetic, almost too perfect, few knew what it truly cost him to become that man. Behind the red carpet flashbulbs and the tailored designer suits is a story far darker than most imagine. A story of obsession so intense it nearly broke his identity. A method performance that blurred the lines between fiction and reality. And a private loss so devastating it pushed him to the brink just as the spotlight found him. Because to become Elvis Presley, Austin Butler had to lose a part of himself. Some called it dedication, others whispered it looked like possession, and when the applause finally faded, he was left wondering, who am I now? The truth? It's not what fans think. This is not just another Hollywood success story. It's a tale of transformation, grief, ambition, and the thin, dangerous line between genius and self-destruction. Austin Butler became a hero on the red carpet, but the journey that brought him there is much darker. Long before the lights of Hollywood found him, Austin Butler was just a quiet boy from Anaheim, California, a child of suburban silence, raised far from the chaos of celebrity. He wasn't born into fame. There were no family connections, no powerful relatives waiting to open doors. Just a boy, his mother, and a dream that hadn't yet found its voice. Austin was only 7 when his parents divorced. He stayed with his mother, Lori, a woman who worked as an esthetician and poured everything she had into raising her son. She saw something in Austin, a softness, a sensitivity, but also a hunger to create. They weren't wealthy. While other kids played sports, Austin found escape in guitar strings, old movies, and the magic of performance. He was shy, painfully shy. But when he was alone, he'd mimic voices, act out scenes, lose himself in characters. It wasn't about attention, it was survival, a way to make sense of emotions he didn't yet have the words for. At 13, his life changed in the most unexpected way. While accompanying his stepbrother to a background acting gig, someone noticed him, a casting assistant. She asked if he had an agent. He didn't. But something in his eyes must have sparked interest. That encounter would lead to his first auditions and the beginning of a long, winding road through the unforgiving corridors of the entertainment industry. But what no one knew then, what even Austin himself couldn't have predicted, was how deeply acting would embed itself into his soul. It wasn't just a job, it became his identity. As his peers navigated teenage heartbreak and high school dances, Austin juggled scripts, studio lots, and the quiet ache of being misunderstood. He appeared in small roles on Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, always just adjacent to stardom, never quite breaking through. Behind every polite smile on screen was a boy carrying 2 weights, the pressure to prove himself and the growing realization that his mother, the one person who truly believed in him, wasn't well. Lori was diagnosed with cancer, while Austin was still a teenager. The same woman who once drove him to every audition, every late-night rehearsal, now needed him more than ever. And as the world began to notice the handsome young actor with soulful eyes, he was silently preparing for the greatest loss of his life. In 2014, she passed away. He was 23, and suddenly, the fire that had fueled his pursuit of acting flickered. For a moment, he considered walking away from it all. Because what was the point of chasing a dream if the one person he wanted to make proud was gone? But grief, as it often does, didn't destroy him. It transformed him. It gave him depth. It gave him silence. And inside that silence, Austin Butler started becoming the man who would one day shock the world as Elvis Presley. For years, Austin Butler was the guy who was always almost famous. He had the look, sharp jawline, piercing eyes, that effortless California cool. Casting directors liked him. Teen magazines put him on their radar. He landed recurring roles on shows like Zoey 101, Switched at Birth, and The Carrie Diaries. But no matter how charming his presence, the industry seemed unsure of what to do with him. He was too clean-cut to be edgy, too soulful to play it shallow. Austin knew what people saw when he walked into an audition room, a pretty boy, polished, safe. But inside, he was something else entirely, a man with a storm brewing just beneath the surface. And when you've lost your mother and spent your adolescence fighting for relevance, you start craving something more than just screen time. You crave purpose. He started saying no. No to easy scripts. No to roles that felt hollow. No to the safety net of teen television. For a while, Hollywood forgot about him, but he didn't forget about Hollywood. Instead, he retreated, took acting lessons, dug into Shakespeare, read Stanislavski. He worked with seasoned theater directors and studied the craft like his life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Then came a spark. In 2018, Austin appeared on Broadway alongside Denzel Washington in The Iceman Cometh. It was a turning point. Sharing the stage with one of the greatest actors alive, night after night, forced him to rise or be swallowed whole. He rose. Critics took notice. Casting agents began whispering his name again, and in the background, Baz Luhrmann, the visionary director behind Moulin Rouge, was preparing a new project. One that would demand more than just talent. It required transformation, madness, surrender. The role? Elvis Presley. Hundreds auditioned, established names, heartthrobs. Austin was a long shot, but he did something no one else did. He bled for the role. He locked himself in a room and sang Elvis songs until his voice cracked. He memorized interviews, movements, vocal patterns. He sent Luhrmann a tape of himself singing Unchained Melody in a haunting, dimly lit room. When Baz saw it, he reportedly said, "I don't know who this guy is, but that's Elvis." The call came. He had the part. And with it, the countdown to complete immersion began. Austin didn't play Elvis, he became him. Every waking hour, every dream, every muscle memory molded itself into the king of rock and roll. His friends stopped recognizing him. He spoke in Elvis's voice, off camera. He disconnected from his own identity. This wasn't method acting, it was metamorphosis. When Elvis premiered at Cannes, the audience gave him a 12-minute standing ovation. Critics who once dismissed him now compared him to Daniel Day-Lewis. Suddenly, Austin Butler wasn't just famous. He was terrifyingly good. He received a Golden Globe, an Oscar nomination, and a new kind of fame, the kind that isn't just about red carpets, but about reverence. But as the lights burned brighter, few noticed the shadow growing behind them. Because when you give yourself entirely to a role, what happens when the role is done? The world saw brilliance. But Austin Butler was unraveling. After Elvis wrapped filming, something strange happened. He couldn't shake the voice. That slow, southern drawl, it lingered. Even months later, during interviews and press junkets, fans commented, "Why is he still talking like Elvis?" It wasn't an affectation, it was residue, the price of complete immersion. Austin confessed in interviews that he'd put his life on pause for 2 years. Friends said he disappeared into the role so deeply that they were worried. He isolated himself, ate like Elvis, moved like Elvis, thought like Elvis. He barely spoke to family, barely knew where the character ended, and he began. And once the cameras stopped rolling, the come-down was brutal. He was hospitalized shortly after filming. The cause? Exhaustion. His body had shut down. Doctors diagnosed him with a virus that mimicked appendicitis, brought on by stress and overwork. He was alone in a hospital bed, hooked to IVs, unsure if the pain in his chest was physical or existential. And in those quiet hours, the question haunted him. Was it worth it? Because while the world hailed his performance, few understood the internal wreckage it left behind. Behind the awards, the red carpet glamour, the late-night interviews, he was struggling. Not with drugs, not with scandal, but with something far more insidious: identity loss. Who was he now? He'd spent 2 years living inside the skin of a global icon, a man who died tragically young, surrounded by excess and crushed by fame. And the more Austin studied Elvis, the more he saw a reflection of himself. Both were shy boys turned superstars. Both had complicated relationships with grief and ambition. Both had mothers who died too soon and left a void too vast to ever fill. "I think I just let myself go too far," Austin would later admit. "I didn't know how to come back." Friends noticed his demeanor shift. He was quieter. He stopped posting, stopped performing. While Hollywood buzzed with his name, Austin stepped back into silence. And then came the whispers. Some critics called his commitment too much. Others questioned whether the voice was just a gimmick. Social media mocked him. Why is he still in character? They laughed. But they didn't see the weight he was carrying. Because, for Austin Butler, Elvis wasn't just a role, it was a possession, and when he gave the character everything, it took something in return. Fame didn't destroy him, but it changed him, and in a town where reinvention is currency, the line between becoming someone great and losing who you are is razor thin. There was no overdose, no public meltdown, no scandalous headlines. But make no mistake, Austin Butler experienced a collapse, quiet, invisible, and all the more dangerous for it. The world applauded the transformation, the method, the madness, but behind closed doors, Austin was haunted by a simple, terrifying realization. He didn't know how to stop being Elvis. He would wake up in the middle of the night, hearing music that wasn't there, dreaming in a voice that wasn't his, walking through rooms like he was still on set, waiting for a cue that never came. His sense of self had dissolved somewhere along the way. "I lost touch with reality," he admitted later. "I didn't know who I was without the character." He tried to move on, took new roles, threw himself into the next project, Masters of the Air, then Dune, Part 2. But something was different now. There was a heaviness in his eyes. A lingering grief that hadn't yet found language. Because Elvis wasn't just a role, it was the ghost of everything he had buried. His mother, his loneliness, his hunger to be seen, to be enough. And now that the cameras had stopped rolling, the applause faded, and the character gone, all that remained was Austin, stripped bare. Famous, yes. Acclaimed, yes. But internally, profoundly, lost. He admitted to staying in hotel rooms, alone, for weeks. He didn't party, didn't bask in the glow. He studied tapes of himself, trying to hear his voice again. Trying to remember what it sounded like. Because when you spend 2 years becoming someone else, what's left of you when it ends? This wasn't the tragedy of addiction or scandal. It was quieter than that, sadder than that. The tragedy was this. He had finally become everything Hollywood asked of him, and in doing so, nearly lost the very thing that made him great himself. Austin Butler didn't die young like the man he portrayed, but a part of him did. The boy who once lip-synced Elvis songs in his childhood bedroom is gone. In his place stands a man forever marked by the weight of becoming something greater than himself, then trying to find his way back. He speaks differently now, slower, measured. There's a stillness to him, an awareness that few actors his age possess. When asked about Elvis, he doesn't brag, he mourns it. As if talking about a chapter that cost him more than it gave. But maybe that's the price of greatness. His co-stars call him disciplined, directors describe him as unshakable, and fans? They see the humility in his eyes, even as he walks the red carpet in $1,000 suits. He's become more than a breakout star. He's become a mirror of ambition, grief, identity, and what it means to surrender everything for art. Unlike so many others, he didn't self-destruct. He didn't burn out. He endured, quietly, privately. And perhaps that, in the end, is his greatest triumph. Because we live in a culture obsessed with instant fame, viral stars, overnight icons, but Austin Butler is something different. He's the slow burn, the long game. The artist who bled for a role, broke under its weight, and came back sharper, softer, and more human. And maybe that's the story we really needed. Not just the story of a man who played Elvis, but the story of a man who survived it.